Hello and welcome back to Aetheral Space 0.15 from Heaven to the Earth, Part 1.
We are back.
We are back.
Sorry, I had
Time
to
for me,
add
Des.
to throw me off. Yes, I'm excited to be back. It's been a little bit, but always, Aether is one of my favorite things to read. And just a quick reminder, because I'm afraid I'll forget after, if you have been enjoying Aether and you haven't yet, please leave a review on Royal Road. Let's get the series skyrocketing on the internet so we can finally get all of the fan content we've been waiting for.
Yeah. And if you've been reading Aetheral and picking up all this hidden sort of keywords, Emerald Skies, you've just been activated. You know what to do.
Hey, hang on. Hold on. My cat is
he's been activated.
No, my cat's eating something. Let me get her out of here. I couldn't tell what. Kitty, you're usually so good. I think she ate a pretzel, which is probably really bad, but I didn't see, so hopefully not. Alright, without further ado, shall we?
Yeah.
Alright. It was a rare day when it would rain on Mar. Actual rain. Water. Not a toxic deluge or flesh-eating storm. Azez and Tazir trudged through the mud as an ocean's worth of water crashed against them drop by drop, the hoods of their raincoats pulled up high over their heads. It was not quiet. Quiet was not a state that existed on the war world of Mar. In the distance, the roar of a horror echoed. But this was just about as quiet as it got. It was just Azez, Tazir, and the trudging. Peace like this was measured in seconds on Mar, but those few seconds were treasured all the same. It had not been quiet the night before, though. Far from it. A ship had come down, not far from their camp. That in itself wasn't particularly unusual. It was fairly common for ships to be shot down and annihilate encampments entirely when they crashed. What was unusual was for a ship to come down intact. As they crested the hill, Tazir spotted what they'd come for. The vessel looked almost comical, rocket-shaped, with a bubble-like window protruding from the top. It had left a deep trail in the landscape behind it where it had come down. Swallowing, he tightened his grip on his rifle and nodded to his younger subordinate before heading down towards the crash site. Azez followed after, the two of them skidding through the mud. This area had become an impromptu corpse field after a battle several weeks ago, the bodies preserved relatively well by an experimental cryo-weapon. As such, the frozen bodies provided a relatively stable footing as they made their final approach. With the damage the ship had already sustained, getting the cockpit open was actually fairly easy. Tazir had experience with working on starships, so a few surgical slams of his rifle into the proper areas manually activated the release hinges. Azez trained his rifle in the cockpit as it slowly opened, tongue gliding over his lips in tense anticipation. The roar echoed from the distance once again, slightly closer. Azez's eyes reflexively flicked over to the source of the noise for a second, and by the time he looked back, the cockpit had already finished opening. A young woman was sprawled in the ruined cockpit, clearly unconscious. Dark hair hung low over her face, and one of her arms was clearly twisted the wrong way. Slowly, Tazir reached down and pulled one of her eyelids open. Black sclera, an umbrand. Tazir and Azez exchanged a glance. They'd heard about what had happened, of course, everyone had. The Umbrans had conspired with the creature called the Blind Man to assassinate a gene noble, to fly her ship directly into a star and roast her into nothingness. In retaliation, a recall had been declared against the whole subspecies. As servants of the gene nobles themselves, it was Tazir and Azez's duty to put this girl down before she could ever open her eyes again. However, Tazir looked at Azez. However, Azez looked at Tazir. And Tazir spoke. "Get her back to camp." 5 years after the fall of Azum. On that day, the flag of the Tazir supremacy flew over every building on the newly christened Azum Ha. Few knew the significance of that name. Most believed it to simply be the supreme surname, but those who had known Tazir felt some comfort at hearing his name resound through the galaxy like that. At this point, though, those who still remembered that man's name were very few indeed. Can I ask a question while I interrupt the flow?
Yeah, go ahead.
So this might be a result of names changing, or maybe it's just not canon anymore. But when I was first writing my old fanfic of back in 1000 Revs, you said early on they would have been called the Creati Supremacy. Did that ever come into play, or was that like Tazir's formal name that you changed? Or
That would have been the that's a change. Unfortunately, I can't from that as well.
okay, but that's what was always the intent. Was it was originally named after this guy?
Yeah.
Okay, but then it just got shortened to Supremacy. Womp womp.
Yeah.
Azez
Exactly.
Tazir and Biashu Del Mar. One had adopted his name as their own, and the other had taken that of the planet they had met on. It had taken 5 years for the Tazir Supremacy to finish rebuilding after the battle on Azum, now Azum Ha, the name of the planet amended by the flagship that had landed and become its Dawn House. They had expected it to take much longer, truth be told, but a victory that had once been thought impossible did wonders for the morale of a workforce. The temples and buildings had been repurposed, a working society carved into the skeleton of the old world. Even new skyscrapers now rose above the sea of the past, glittering in the sunlight as traffic flowed overhead. Today, though, all of that traffic was flowing in one direction, towards what they were calling the Arena of the Absolute. The 5-year anniversary, and the completion of the rebuilding that came with it, was no small occasion. Citizens were coming from all over the Tazir Supremacy to celebrate, and those members of the Zaylan Morhan that still remained had spared no effort in the celebrations. A Re-Nayane of the Gene Tyrants had been going on for a week in the city. What's a Re-Nayane?
It's when they've been dead for a while, but you want to get some more celebration out of it.
You just remembered how awesome it is that they're dead?
Yeah, exactly.
A grand festival of stalls and shows and burnings. And to conclude the festivities, a great event was to be held in the newly finished arena. The Supreme himself, Azez the Absolute, would stand on high and be honored for his valor and strength. There would be speeches and retellings and a radiant display of his lantern of truth, so as to assure the people that the strength that protected them would continue to do so. Once that was done, Azez would sit his throne and observe a grand melee between the most promising new fighters of the Supremacy, those that had the potential to one day replace him. It was sure to be a day to remember. The cheering of the waiting crowds could already be heard from far above as Biashu Del Mar walked through the bowels of the Arena of the Absolute, loud enough to pour through layers upon layers of sturdy ceilings and supports. She smiled ruefully to herself as she walked across the catwalk, heading through the automated generator chambers that kept the arena running. Nothing had even happened yet, and they were already losing their minds. Still, though, she wasn't in a celebrating mood. For the last few weeks she'd been busy. Herself and a few other members of the Zaylan Morhan had been investigating rumors of a plot, a scheme to assassinate Azez during the event. It wouldn't be the first time someone had put such a dark plan together. After the victory over the Gene Tyrants, the opportunists that had previously followed Azez for safety's sake had now gone from seeing him as a protector to an obstacle in their pursuit of greater power and influence. Biashu had taken the heads of a few such traitors already. And this time she wasn't alone in her hunt. Reaching the end of the walkway, Biashu stepped into an elevator and began descending deeper into the arena's depths. The sound of the crowd above grew fainter and fainter before suddenly cutting out entirely. It seemed the bottommost level of the arena was beyond their voices' reach. Good. This was a time for miserable business. It wouldn't do for happiness to be present. The doors to the elevator slid open, and Biashu stepped out into her final destination. This part of the arena was dark and mostly empty, holding the skeleton of future construction, girders, and frameworks, rather than anything right now. The plan was to fit the arena with a massive repulsor so it could fly and relocate itself, but for the moment that was just a pipe dream. It made it a convenient location to hold such a meeting at any rate. Her fellow hunters were already present. Edgar and Rory. To be honest, they weren't the ones that Biashu would have picked, but there weren't so many Aether users of their caliber that she could be picky. Edgar smiled at her in that eerily serene way of his, while Rory paced anxiously, her arms crossed. Biashu had never truly understood what was going on in Edgar's head, and Rory's devotion to Azez was uncomfortably close to zealotry. At the very least, though, Biashu was sure they wouldn't be involved in any plot to take him down. Well, Biashu asked, black and yellow eyes flicking between the two of them. Driver, was he here? Rory answered the question simply enough. Without saying a word, she swung her arm and tossed a severed head at Biashu's feet. The dead eyes of Essa Driver stared up at the ceiling, his lips parted in a final expression of shock. Judging from the relatively intact state of his head, save for the fact it wasn't attached to his body, it didn't look like there had been much of a fight. You were right, Ruri said. "When we got here, he'd been setting up some sort of device against the reactors. We think he was trying to turn the whole arena into a bomb." "Well, if you were looking to kill the galaxy's strongest man, you'd want to be sure." "Anyone else with him?" Bishu asked curtly. "Some co-conspirators," Edgar replied, cool blue eyes fixed on the severed head. "They're no longer a concern. What is a concern is what their plan was." Bishu frowned. "The bomb? Weren't you able to deactivate it?" "Not the bomb," Edgar continued, his voice as calm as could be. "Our concern is what Driver intended to do after his assassination plot succeeded." Slowly, Bishu nodded. "I see. That makes sense. I'd be surprised if they put all this work into getting rid of the current leadership and didn't have a way of getting themselves in power afterwards." "That's the thing, though," Ruri muttered. Unlike Edgar, her eyes were fixed on the ground. "They weren't looking to seize power for themselves. They were planning to put you on the throne." Silence drifted into the space between them. A cold silence that permitted no movement. Edgar didn't blink, and Ruri's pink eyes flicked up to meet Bishu's gaze. This wasn't the first time such a thing had happened. Ever since the victory over the Gene Tyrants, Azez had been forced to harden his heart in order to hold the nascent Tazir supremacy together. Pirates and bandits, rebels and dissidents, the fist he'd brought down upon them hadn't quite been iron, but it had been close. He'd only done what he'd had to do, but people didn't see it that way. In comparison, Bishu was thought of as someone closer to the civilians. Silk rather than steel. Azez broke the chains of slaves, but Bishu led them into freedom. So went the thinking. It was no surprise that some people thought the time had come for the Supreme to be the latter rather than the former. Bishu sighed, running an awkward hand over her face. Something had to be done about this. Something definitely had to be done about this, to make it clear to such scum that Bishu wouldn't go along with their plans. But for the time being, at least this plot had been foiled. She crossed her arms, looking to Ruri. "We'll need to take precautions against future plots like this," she said. "Ruri, I heard you'll be joining Grandpa's Maker Guild once he's got the place up and running. Is there anything he could come up with for us?" Ruri said nothing. She just continued to stare at Bishu. "Ruri?" Bishu frowned. Again, Ruri said nothing. She didn't even blink. "We have a solution," Edgar said, shifting slightly. "Only it doesn't involve Grandpa." Bishu looked to Edgar, and then back to Ruri. There was a certain coldness in their eyes, both of them, a veritable blizzard from Edgar, but a sliver of ice even in Ruri's pink gaze. The slight smile died from Bishu's lips, and the final pieces of the jigsaw clicked into place. The fact that this meeting was secret, the fact that Edgar and Ruri had come here together, and above all else, the fact that this floor was clearly soundproofed. Bishu looked over to Edgar. There was no mercy in his eyes, but she hadn't expected to find any anyway. His hand twitched. So did hers. "Your idea?" she asked. "You'd be surprised," he replied. Several weeks earlier. Deep in a forgotten temple on Azum Ha, a single table and 2 chairs had been set out. When they were done here, that table and those chairs would be aged into nothingness. Even if this entire conversation took place only in the forgotten shadows, not a single trace of it could be allowed to remain. Ruri looked over the table at Edgar. "We need to get rid of the Bishu," she said, her voice strained. Her pink eyes wavered, but she didn't look away. Edgar narrowed his own eyes in inspection of her resolve. This was something she truly believed, it seemed, even if she hated herself for doing so. Edgar simply cocked his head in response. "You think so?" "I do." "Why?" Ruri clenched her fists on the tabletop. "Azez is the Supreme. Azez is the supremacy. He's the one who broke our chains and led us all to freedom, and people don't understand that just because he has to do some things that don't always look that good. I heard someone talking the other day, you know?" "I hear people talking most days," Edgar smiled placidly. Ruri slammed her fist against the table. "No! I heard someone saying..." She squeezed her eyes shut, her face slick with sweat, as if voicing these concerns was physically painful for her. "I heard someone saying that Azez was a leader for war, but Bishu was the one for peacetime. Peacetime! Like such a thing exists. They don't even get it." "I find few people do," Edgar replied. To be honest, I found that a status quo tends to settle quickly. It's easy for the unwise to forget just how fragile this supposed peace of ours is. Bishu has always been the closest one of us to the civilian populace. I'm not surprised the cowards are drifting to her banner. It's the same with Driver. Rory ran a hand through her hair. Even if, she began before needing to take a breath, even if right now she's not going along with it, that doesn't mean the day won't come when she does go along with it. We need to take that possibility off the table entirely. Edgar blinked. I agree, he lied. Better it's dealt with now than later, and I doubt we'll get a better opportunity. Still, don't you feel like this is betraying Azaz? Rory took a deep breath. We'd be betraying him more by doing nothing, she said firmly. It was no surprise that Rory had come to Edgar with this, he reflected. His disposition made him the most likely to go along with such a ruthless and pragmatic plan, but more than that, he and Rory had something in common. Both of them would go untouched by the hands of time. Edgar's condition wasn't nearly as terminal as Rory's aether tick, but Trilogy Blue had been designed with aesthetics in mind. Any aging would only affect the inside of Edgar's body. From the outside, he'd remain in this pristine and beautiful state until the day he died. One day, he would simply stop working. Like a discarded doll. It was the same for Zarakel. Perhaps this superficial similarity had created some notion of camaraderie within Rory's mind. Even if that was the case, it was surely mistaken. Edgar thought of Rory as he would think of any other person. As for her scheme... To tell the truth, Edgar felt that he'd reached the end of the value the Supremacy as an institution could offer him right now. He'd like to get the best results from his exit, too, if possible. If he were to cast these ties aside, this was probably the best way to do it. After all, this would serve as a useful example. Pink aether surged, blue aether crackled, white aether shone. Chrono-dissonance! As Rory whipped her plasma pistol from its holster, the weapon was already infused with her ability. Aether had long since taken the Salen Morhan past the point of fearing plasma shots, but a plasma shot accelerated and strengthened by chrono-dissonance. That was another story. She grit her teeth as she raised the pistol, caught between necessity and regret. Beast crown! As Edgar waved a hand over his face, a transparent crown-shaped construct manifested over his eyes like a visor. The current of the aether around him intensified just a little, sparks running over his entire body. His expression didn't shift at all, though. Those cold blue eyes didn't blink, and that serene smile didn't so much as flicker. True flow! Bishu's pupils brightened from yellow to a pure white, and she pulled twin scimitars from their sheaths in a single smooth, perfect movement. She said nothing. Despite the brightness of her eyes, they had somehow also taken on a dull and dark aspect. It was the same for all of them. They had realized, after all, the time for talk had long since passed. This was the time for killing. I'm noticing a very strong influence, perhaps.
In the picture, the layout.
In this picture, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very cool image. It's very reminiscent of a specific panel from the Culling games in JJK, if you're not familiar.
That was one of the references, yeah.
I'm not going to verbally describe an image, but you all should take time to look at the video and or in Royal Road, because it's very nice. I can't believe, though. Look how angry Rory looks. She's genuinely angry.
You have genuinely angered me.
Also, I love Edgar's lipstick. Look at him. He's so fashionable. Very gaunt fellow.
He's got his party hat around his eyes.
Very neat. Very fun. I can't believe they would do this to Bishu. Heartbreaking. How did history rewrite Bishu as a man now? I'm curious.
That just sort of got lost in translation over time.
Fucked up. The results of misogyny
She got
in Tan's
Fate
world.
Stay Knighted.
Sigh. Is that your actual answer?
What do you mean?
That's not... Oh,
not in so many ways. I'm meaning a little bit when I say she got Fate Stay Knighted.
The patriarchy is a cruel machine. Alright, let's answer some questions, shall we, chat?
Sure.
And you have another one we're reading tomorrow, right? So I shouldn't do them all?
Yes.
Okay. Lan asks, what was Gale's approach to the UAP?
It was a relatively peaceful time, Cold War-wise. He was more focused on maintaining peace within the Supremacy's borders. So there would have been some fortification on the border, but nothing in terms of external attacks during his reign. So he was considered relative for a supreme. It was pretty popular outside the supremacy.
And how long was he supreme for?
It would have been quite well. I would say at least 20 years.
Okay. Time for Time asks, what happens to recorded objects when the user dies? Actually, didn't we answer this one?
Yeah.
Or they just
Well,
disappear?
effectively, it's gone. But it's still in the Aether, just no one can really access it.
Yeah.
So, if, for example... no, we're not meant to mention added trees.
Actually, as someone with access to the Aetheral Place, could Bruno find all the recorded objects and grab them?
He's not able to do
that. Suppose someone with a Gemini Dominion-like ability were to die within their own Aetheral Space TM. What would happen to them?
Well, okay, so you die inside your Aether. You're dead.
Well, like, say Dragon has Gemini Dominion someone, then he gets shot in the head. Do they just go to limbo forever?
Well, yeah, that's the I would say the ability is still active, so they would be able to break out in the way they could break out of a normal Gemini Dominion.
Okay, because it's not the same as a true recording.
Well, it's recording, but it's recording with certain conditions, one of which is the ability... one of which is, like, the ability to break out, yeah, so they can still break out.
Okay, but what if Dragon Gemini worlds Ruth and then gets shot in the head? Is Ruth, like, in limbo for eternity?
No. Because maybe.
Interesting.
If it's Gemini World or Shotgun instead.
Yeah. Rurum asks, who were the original core members of the UAP?
I don't want to go into that here necessarily. One of them, of course, was Roland Nebula. But, well, no, I would say the UAP isn't necessarily what Roland Nebula made. He was made one of the nations that then became part of the UAP. In the future.
So, like, Roland and his people made a bunch of systems, and then as the supremacy grew, they, like, banded together.
Exactly,
like,
yes.
It's like a UN-type scenario.
Exactly, yeah.
Lan asks, what happens if two people simultaneously try to record an object they're multi-infusing?
There's probably like an Aether off. Whoever, like, they'd probably, like, try and overpower the other one's infusion. Or they would each take a little bit of, like, half of it.
Lan asks, what happens if two people... Oh, wait, I just asked that.
You okay?
Lan asks, did Wu Ming ever have an Aether/combat teacher?
Wu Ming has never learned anything from anyone else.
That's beautiful.
He taught himself to speak. Maybe that. Maybe he learned how to talk.
Stringing sentences together.
It's like, oh, I understand it now.
Mother, bring me pie, please.
Mother, bring the family dog. I want to fight.
I love it. So I have a question. Because a lot of Aether users are violent, but we know Aether's not necessarily violent. When Wu Ming was a kid, was he, like, creating combat abilities and fighting off the get-go, or were his early years just, like, fun Aether?
I would say he's the freest man alive, so whatever he wanted to do, he could basically do it aetherally.
Aether ability that transmutes something into a banana so he can eat it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's beautiful. All right, there's a few more, but let's save those for next time, I think, is the way to do that.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you all for watching, and hey, maybe we'll even see you again next time. Bye!
Bye.